DRC is bigger than Burundi. DRC is the biggest nation in East Africa. This video is about comparison. You learn how to compare one thing or one person to another one. You also learn how to compare one thing or one person to a group of things or people. I'm Joachim from Bujumbura English Center. Are you ready? Let's get started. Most of the time, when you compare things or people, you use adjectives, and we have 4 categories of adjectives. First of all, short adjectives. Short adjectives are adjectives with one syllable, like big, small, and so on. You've got long adjectives. Long adjectives are adjectives with 2 or more syllables, like, for example, serious, important, interesting, expensive, boring, and so on. We've got also adjectives ending in Y. So you will see Y at the end of these adjectives, like, for example, happy, dirty, noisy, and last of all, irregular adjectives. There are 3: bad, good, and far. So the way you deal with comparison depends upon the kind of adjective that you have, whether it's a long adjective or a short adjective or an adjective ending in Y or an irregular adjective. Let's start with the short adjectives. When you have a short adjective, you make a comparative adjective and a superlative adjective by adding respectively er and est. For example, big becomes bigger and the biggest in comparative and superlative respectively. And if you have tall, then you understand you'd have taller for the comparative and the tallest for the superlative. That's how it works for short adjectives. And when you're dealing with an adjective ending in Y, then you need to change that Y into I and you add er or est, like for short adjectives. And then if you have happy, then it becomes, for the comparative, happier. For the superlative, it becomes the happiest. And if you have the adjective noisy, then you have noisier for the comparative and the noisiest for the superlative. What about long adjectives? In front of a longer adjective, you need to add the word more for the comparative and the most for the superlative. So, for example, the word expensive, you say more expensive to form the comparative adjective and the most expensive to form the superlative form of that adjective. And then if you are in front of an irregular adjective, then you understand there is no rule. It's irregular. You have to memorize how they change. Good becomes better in comparative and the best in superlative. And bad becomes worse in comparative and the worst in superlative. Far becomes further in comparative and the furthest in superlative. So let's go with some examples of sentences including comparison. If I want to compare DRC and Burundi, I will say DRC is bigger than Burundi. I have to use the word than for the comparative. And I could say DRC is the biggest nation in East Africa. Here I'm comparing DRC to other nations of East Africa. So it's a group of countries that I'm comparing DRC to. So in this case, we use the superlative adjective. Now, you can understand that we use the superlative form for a comparison between one element and a group of things. And we use the comparative when you compare one thing or one person to another one. That is the rule of the use of the superlative and the comparative adjectives. Let's provide another example, like let's use an example of a long adjective. I can say An airplane is more important than a car. Or I can say, in terms of cost, an airplane is more expensive than a car. So here I am using the word more in front of the adjective expensive to make the comparative. And I could say that the airplane is the most expensive means of transport in the world. Yeah, I assume so. And this is an example about a long adjective. I can also provide an example for an irregular adjective. Like, for example, you could say, malaria is worse than flu, or cancer is worse than malaria. This is the comparative. Then I can say, cancer is the worst of all diseases. Yes, these are some examples including an irregular adjective. And according to me, Samsung is better than iPhone. And I think that Samsung is the best phone in the world. Yeah, these are examples including short adjectives. And then let's compare water and oil in terms of importance. I would say water is more important than oil. But if I compared water to other drinks, I would say that water is the most important drink of all. I would say water is the most important of all drinks. Water is the most important drink of all. Water is the most important drink in the world. Sometimes you see that the difference between the things you are comparing is very big, and then you need to emphasize the comparison. So, for the comparative, we add the word much, and for the superlative, we add the word by far. And so, if you want to compare Burundi's economy to the US economy, you would say the US economy is much bigger or much stronger than Burundi's economy. Then you can say the US economy is by far the largest or the biggest in the world. Yes, this is how you deal with comparison. I hope you have understood how you compare two things and how you compare one thing to a group of things. I hope you can provide examples of your own. Now I would like you to do this exercise. I have three students. Peter, who is 18 years old, John, who is 25 years old, and David, who is 30 years old. Exercise number 1. Compare John and Peter. You say, Peter is younger than John, or John is older than Peter. Now, exercise number 2, compare David to the remaining. You say, David is the oldest student in my class. And I also have these three students who have different heights. Peter is 1.5 meters tall, and John is 1.6 meters tall, while David is 1.8 meters tall. So I want you to compare David and John. You say, David is taller than John. And if you compare David to the remaining, you say, David is the tallest student of my class. Yes, did you get the answers? Excellent. Now, let me invite you to compare these things and put your answers in the comment section. Please drop your answers in the comment section and I see if you have understood how to compare things. The first one is to compare a TV and a telephone in terms of size. A TV and a phone in terms of size. And then compare Russia to other nations of the world in terms of size. Compare Russia to other nations of the world in terms of size. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you have a success with this exercise, and I hope you can compare things effectively using comparative adjectives and superlative adjectives. Until next time, bye bye.